India. At a time when India's aviation sector is scaling at an unprecedented speed, with passenger traffic projected to cross 600 million annually by 2030, connectivity no longer is just a supporting pillar for hospitality, and we know that improved connectivity fuels hospitality. Let's take a look. And now we move on to a very special conversation at Hope, one that goes beyond strategy and numbers, one that takes us onto the entrepreneurial journey behind building one of India's most successful institutional hospitality platforms. Coming up next is Tales from Heads, Stories that Inspire, bringing us a story of vision, resilience, and long-term conviction. The story of building Samhi Hotels into one of India's leading institutional hotel ownership companies. Ladies and gentlemen, with a generous round of applause, let's welcome onto the stage Chairman and Founder CEO of Samhi Hotels, Mr. Ashish Jakhanwala, in a very special conversation with Founder and Executive Chairman of Indian School of Hospitality, Mr. Dilip Puri. Over to you, Mr. Puri.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last session for the day, keeping you from the bar. Since the introductions were already made, we'll try and get right into it, Ashish. And so I want to start by really trying to get into Ashish's head, since the theme itself is Tales from the Head. So normally a question you're asked last, but what keeps you awake at night, Ashish? I'm imagining must be something to do with growth, debt, capital, lenders, investors. So what is it that happens to you at night when you suddenly have to wake up almost as if you're getting up from a nightmare?
Dilip, I think if what you're supposed to do for 8 hours a day, if it keeps you up for the next 24 hours, you're doing a bad thing. I don't think I've ever woken up at night. First of all, I think worrying is a fairly futile way of dealing with a problem. So if you have a problem, whether it's day or night, worrying about it is not going to get you anywhere. So I don't think I wake up at night with a worry. There are bad dreams. There are excitements in life. There are anxieties. It's very momentary. It's very topical. There's not been one theme. But I normally don't get worried, honestly. You've known me for a very long time.
I know. I wish I could tell the audience things about what I think keeps you awake at night, but I won't.
He sent me most of the questions from ChatGPT. I have all my answers from ChatGPT also.
So, again, staying with your head, Ashish. So what has changed the most in your head from early Samhi days when you were starting off to a post-IPO Samhi as it is today?
I think it's a transition from pace to patience. When you're a young, and it's not about Samhi's journey, Dilip, right? For anybody who creates a company and builds it and runs it for 10, 14, 15 years, try and understand the person has also evolved, and it's impossible that the person wouldn't evolve, right? I mean, men don't evolve usually, but there is some evolution. So I think from being fast-paced, looking at speed, I used to call it sense of urgency. That was a very cute word to say I'm impatient. I think there's a certain amount of patience that has come in. And I think that's a beautiful transition as you grow from being a 35-year-old entrepreneur to a 50-year-old person running a company. And that's a very natural transition.
I remember in your own words, you would say that you were in those young days cheeky. Is that the word you used?
No. Dilip called me and said, I'm going to be interviewing you, and you've become very boring over the last few years, okay? You used to give this one-liners, and they were real fun. And since you've taken the company public, you're very cautious and you're very controlled. And I said, Dilip, none of that. I just don't want to be cheeky. Doesn't mean that I cannot be cheeky. I don't want to be cheeky.
But you used to be cheeky.
That's your opinion.
So Ashish, what's the biggest myth you think people have about how you think as a hotel investor?
So I was with Suma this afternoon. And typically when you're talking about a myth that people have about you, you're trying to assume an assumption, correct? What is their assumption about me? I'm trying to assume that. And that's a very tricky thing to assume an assumption, assume an assumption. And I think I heard people say that we don't leave a penny on the table, hard negotiators. I actually think that's a myth. The reason we've been able to build a company fairly quickly, and I know 15 years is not a short time, but look at my peers. The youngest one will be 28, 30 years old, right? It's because we've felt that it's not the numbers that drive the business. It's always the business that drives the numbers. So the myth is that we squeeze out the last penny in a negotiation or in a contract. Actually, unlike that, some of our deals are the fastest ones. If you talk to the counterparties we talk to, we do negotiate, but we don't take a long time to negotiate. So I think that's one myth, that we just chase these numbers and 9 rupees is better than 10 and 8 is better than 9. I don't think we do that.
Okay, let's get into some more serious questions. So let's think about strategy, about capital.
Mandeep, what are these people doing outside? There's so much interesting conversation happening inside. What are these people doing outside? Clearly, we're not signing any contract with the people who are outside,
So Ashish, if you had 1,000 crores today with no constraints, where would your head deploy it first? Land, brands, conversions, debt reduction? What would you do?
First of all, Dilip, investing is not about money. When I started SAMHI, I didn't have 1,000 crore. When COVID happened, I didn't have 1,000 crores. Today, I think I have 1,000 crores. But the fact is, we continue to grow the company through all those periods. So investing is not about money. I tell people, when you get money, and this is for second generation people in this room, and there are a bunch of them. When you get money, you make money from money. You don't make business from money. You make business from efforts. So it's okay to take daddy's money and start a business. You'll be smarter to take daddy's money and just make money out of money. If you want to make a business, it should be out of brute efforts. So just to set context, what I want to do has nothing to do with 1,000 crores. Right? Now, what do I want to do? On any given day, I'll do a conversion. On any given day, I will do a conversion. I will not like to build hotels, management contracts, not worth my time. You get, for all the effort, you have to work hard 18 hours a day, deal with people, bad coffees, bad check-ins, bad checkouts, fight for business every day. You get 5%. We are more expensive than that.
We'll talk about that.
Right.
I know you have issues.
That we won't do, but conversions any day of the week.
So what's the most counterintuitive bet you've made that turned out right? And what bet you might have made which failed or didn't turn out right? Give me one example of each.
So the most and I've been thinking about this, you did prep me, and I'm not really good at being prepped because I end up having wrong answers. So I had some answers for this. When we bought what is now Sheraton Hyderabad, Hyderabad was in dumps. When we bought Hyatt Regency Pune, Pune was in dumps. When we bought, what is now the Holiday Inn Express platform, 14 square meter room, people told us it won't work. So that was counterintuitive. But actually, the most counterintuitive bet I have made was to start SAMHI. And go back to 2010-11. India is clearly not what it is today. I'm 35 years old, and I go to US investors to say, I need to start a company. And they say, how much is your seed capital requirement? And I tell them $100 million. So I think I was a little dumb to do that. So Tom, who you know well, who was on my board, my largest investor, he said, I've seen two magics in his life. The first magical thing was that I got the money. And the second magical thing was I didn't screw it up. So I think the most counterintuitive bet was to start SAMHI in 2011, because India was not what it is today, Dilip. There was no startup culture. There was no institutionalized way to raise capital. There was no formats for an entrepreneur to go and raise this, seed, Series A, Series B. There were no words like that then. And to go and say, I want to raise $100 million as my first round was very counterintuitive. And it worked well.
And what didn't work because of a counterintuitive decision you might have taken?
So I'll tell you, I was once with Mr. Uday Kotak, and he said something very beautiful. He said, when you click photographs of India, those still photographs are very dirty. You know, there's projects stuck, there's muck on the road. There's no still photograph is pleasant. But when you make that into a movie, it's very beautiful. India as a movie over the last 20 years. For every company, every still photograph is bad. So every deal we have done had problems. You know, when we invested in Formula One, we had problems. When we invested in what is Sheraton Hyderabad, we had problems for the first 2 years. When we bought the Premier Inn portfolio, we had problems for the first few years. I have now learned that investment is about not wanting to make mistakes, but knowing you'll make mistakes and then go and fix it. So if you talk about what doesn't work, I have things on a daily basis that don't work. But our job is to go and fix them. And I've just learned that, I asked Nakul and Gyana the other day, I said, you want to be entrepreneurial or intelligent? Okay. Because you guys, in the morning when you come fresh, have a coffee, you talk entrepreneurial. By the time you have lunch, you start becoming really intelligent. And by the end of the day, you've not achieved anything in life because there's a conflict between intelligence and entrepreneurship. So you figure out whether you want to be entrepreneurial or you want to be intelligent. And if you want to be intelligent, stop buying hotels.
But if you want to be entrepreneurial?
Great place. But then you have to have the grit to fold your sleeve and make it work. Intelligence ain't getting you there, by the way. Who's intelligent in this room? I saw one finance guy from Varde. I think he is the most qualified person in this room. Asim, sorry.
He's telling you all you're not intelligent, guys. Come on.
Who's? Like, I mean, come on, go back, right? CAT, JEE, IT, you know.
Okay, so Ashish, the Indian hotel cycle clearly looking very strong. All the previous panelists, it's as if we're in this Ram Rajya golden age. How disciplined are you in terms of not getting carried away with this? And how often do you kind of do a reality check that, look, it's all good, but...
I think the success comes when you are not swayed by cycles, good or bad, Dilip. Okay. You have to stay, okay, cycles is a job of a consultant. Because you look at the past 2 years, you put some formula and you get the next 3 years, right? For an investor, it's about really looking beyond that. And I think you should not stop doing what you're doing in bad cycles. We didn't. We were buying hotels when things were bad. We've bought hotels till a year back, which is a great cycle. So I think for investors, they have to have the game of patience for the long term. I think there is a bit of a exuberance today, clearly. And we've seen this, remember in 2004, 5, 6, rates were high in Bangalore. Anurag, you'll remember Leela at that time, you know, it was with your previous owners.
India shining it was.
It was one of the highest rate hotels in Asia at that time. And all my consultant friends will take that average room rate into 1.05 raised to the power infinity. Okay, so that was the forecast for Leela Bangalore, right? I tell people, you know, when you go to a wild party and people are drunk, you know, go to a wild party. I've not been to those, you've been to, so you know better. So you go to these wild parties, just to clarify, guys, okay? So you go to these wild parties, you get dead drunk, you end up conceiving things that you never wanted.
Conceiving things.
That you never wanted. Okay. Things. And we are waiting because we love to give attention and love to underappreciated assets. So I hope this wild party will get some people drunk and they will end up conceiving things that they don't want because at the end of it, we'll be waiting.
Okay, so...
Am I being cheeky enough?
Totally,
Okay.
totally. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about leadership, decision-making. So do you typically make decisions more analytic analytically or instinctively? And how do you know when to trust the data or the analytics versus what your instinct and guts are telling you?
I'll solve this for you. So, first of all, I think the biggest myth is that the brain is smarter than the heart. Correct? We've somehow all been taught that this part of the body is smarter intellectually than this part of the body. And I think it's a myth. So, if you go to a company, there are analysts and there are strategists, right? People who develop strategy, and there are people who run Excel sheets. Who do you pay more? People who develop strategies. So your heart is your strategist. Your brain is your analyst. Okay. Don't ever think that the brain is smarter than your heart. So the way I put it is that you have to have a bit of a intuitive intelligence. If you just have intelligence, you'll be a great analyst, but not a great investor. If you just have intuition, you need a good rich dad. So if you really want to build something credible for the long term, you need to have intuitive intelligence. And it comes with time, Dilip. It's hard. There's no formula for it. There's no course for it. You and I can't go to ChatGPT and get it, right? But I think that intuitive intelligence is the holy grail of investing, not just intelligence. Every time I have made an investment decision purely on numbers, knowing that the product is not good or the customer experience will not be great, but the numbers are very good, it hasn't worked well. And my example of this is when you go to Goa or any Indian city and you see this side lane and there's a neon sign which says discount, most likely you're going to be robbed there. So that Excel sheet driven investing is that neon sign which says discount, right? I mean, look at this number of special situation funds which were in India operating when COVID hit. Not one invested in hotels. In front of them, the biggest disaster of the last 50 years happened. And they had funds called special situation. And the special situation came and it went away because they were all driven by Excel sheet.
So, again, leadership, Ashish, what was perhaps the toughest call you've had to make as a CEO? Not financially, more emotionally and, with people and teams.
I think during COVID, to let go of people, right? And not one or two, a lot of them, knowing in your heart that they may have a problem next month paying their kids' school fee or rent, I think was very harsh. And often I would have debate, and that time Vinay was our asset manager, I hope he's in the room. And I and Vinay used to debate saying, what the heck are we doing? Are we doing it for Goldman Sachs? Because this man as an individual is going to lose his ability to pay his school, kids' rent, school fee or rent. And we are doing it to protect an institutional investor. We tried our best, but I think we could have done a lot better, Dilip. And that's a weight I carry on myself as an investor, that we were so short-sighted. Yes, instead of losing 700 crores, we could have lost 800 crores, right? But look at the opportunity cost for those 1,000 individuals. So I don't think apology will ever serve the purpose. It's a weight we all have to carry on our hearts for the rest of our lives and hopefully do better when...
No, so how would you have done it differently, Ashish, if you had to do it again?
Just expand the damn losses and not let those people lose their jobs. It's not that difficult. We were solving for our problems by getting diluted, raising money. We did what we had to do. I raised money at 19%, Dilip, at that time, right? People thought I was dumb, but I think that's the cheapest money I've ever raised because it helped me protect my company at the worst time. Instead of raising 700 crores, I could have raised 800 crores, right? But I think 1,000 people, life, their kids' future could have been different.
Yeah. Were you able to rehabilitate them later?
No, it's not easy. Easier said than done. You have all these ESG, CSR nonsense that people talk about. I think we failed miserably when we had our moment.
Yeah. So, IPO and public markets, Ashish. So, the day you rang the bell, what happened after that? What changed, if anything did?
So when you're stuck in a storm in the middle of the ocean, no food, no power, your ship is turbulent, you know you're going to die tonight. You're certain you're going to die tonight. And something get you on shore in the morning. Clearly, you're not going to party that night. Okay. So I did not. I rang the bell. I did a meeting after that, actually. I vividly remember. I had a lunch with 8 or 9 people. I went home to my family. I had dinner at home and I slept. It is a moment of, I don't know, I can't explain it. It's survival. And I tell people that our IPO, and most IPOs, by the way, they are not the moment of success. They're the moment of survival. And anybody who confuses survival with success will never be successful. So we survived on that day, Dilip. It was not our moment to celebrate.
So that was, momentarily at that point in time. But help us understand that what changed fundamentally for the business and for you as a CEO post the listing?
No, nothing.
Versus pre?
No, nothing. I think that way we were institutional before, we are institutional now. People ask me, I go to analyst meets and public market investors have lots of questions. So at the end of one of those sessions, they all got up and said, "Sir, sorry, we asked a lot of questions." And I said, "Guys, are you kidding me? I've worked with private equity. You don't even know the syllabus. Your syllabus is set by me because whatever I write in my quarterly presentation, you can only ask questions from that. When you work with private equity, I know Anurag is laughing because he's also, seen that, right? These guys would ask me questions out of syllabus all the time. You guys are I set the syllabus, you ask me questions from that syllabus. I hope it's not being telecasted, Mandeep,
So, again, as a CEO of a listed company, there are many in this room. Are you building SAMI for every quarter's performance, or are you building it for a long legacy? Honestly, as a CEO, what's the priority for you?
So I want to build it for the legacy, and for that I have to keep the quarterly shit out. Okay, that's a reality. So sometimes you do things in the short term. By the way, survival is a great strategy. Don't ever underestimate that. You got to survive a quarter to get to the long term. And if you can't survive quarter on quarter, and if you lose respect of public markets, if they don't trust what you're saying, you have to respect them because it's their capital, Dilip, right? It's not my capital. It's not Anurag's capital, right? It's their capital. So I have to treat them with that respect quarter on quarter so that I can build the legacy I want to build for 20 years.
Okay, so let's get a little more provocative with Ashish. I know a few of his pet peeves. So management contracts versus ownership. Is the Indian market intellectually confused about what creates value?
Yeah, it's intellectually incapable. Confusion is a better state of mind when you know a few things and you're confused about two. They're incapable, right? You are in a market which has growth for next 2-3 decades. You have operating leverage. Put these two things together, why do you want to do anything but own an asset? You're not in Americas where there is no growth and there is no operating leverage. And therefore, it's best to play with somebody else's capital and just get a 5% fee and be happy with it, right? You have lack of scalability in this country, which is the first requirement of asset-light management contracts is massive scalability, right? I mean, you need to sign 20 contracts to do the same revenue I do it in a single hotel. Simple maths, right? 5%, 20 times. First of all, the scalability is not there. If you want to create one Taj Hotels pure asset-light, it would need all of India, forget Pakistan, I think it'll need most of Southeast Asia hotels to be managed by one company to get to that revenue. No scale. Operating leverage is going to the owner. GDP growth and that impact is going to the owner. So I don't get. Global guys have to do it, so it's fine, right? But would I ever work hard, go back to office 9 in the morning, work hard for 12 hours for 5% in a country which has operating leverage and growth? I wouldn't do it. It's return on time. It's my opportunity cost for next 2 decades in this country. Do not copy US. US was building hotels and roads and airports and everything 30 years back. You are at $2,500 per capita income, right? At this point, the person who builds and owns the assets will be the clear winner. So I fundamentally feel markets are not confused. They don't understand where this is headed.
Okay, so
Again, don't tell a
related question. If you had to build Sammy without global brands, would you?
Can I? Yes. Will I? No.
Why?
Time. See, the brand is, with all due respect, is nothing but my bridge to the customer. I see the brand as that bridge between me and my customer. So, distribution is the only thing that I cannot build, to be honest with you. If I have to build distribution in Sammy, and I did a 1,300 crore IPO, I'll have to do it every year for the next 10 years. You know, that's how I can spend $1 billion on AI integration. I can spend the next $500 million on building distribution. I can spend another $1 billion on building loyalty. I have to do a freaking $300 million IPO, QIP, capital raise every year for next 10 years to build a credible distribution platform. Can I? Of course I can. Will I? No.
And why not Indian brands?
No. Don't get me wrong. I talk about global brands. People always try and put words in my mouth. I say global brands. If an Indian brand is global, it's as good as any global brand. I have never said Indian versus Desi versus American. I have never said that, and I clarify on this stage. I have always said global brands.
But मतलब Indian brand तो अभी किया ही नहीं तुमने और लगता करने भी नहीं वाले हो.
That's opportunity. Okay. Opportunity hasn't come. And plus, Indian brands are bad at selling their brands to owners because they're so busy managing their own balance sheet. Try and understand, all Indian brands today, IHCL, ITC, Oberoi's, Lemon Tree, Leela, 80-90% of their value comes from hotels they own. I do empathize with them that at 3 a.m., they're clearly worried about the hotel they own and it's not doing well, right? So, and therefore, the aggression to push their brands to owners is not there, Dilip. Whereas for some of the international brands, they're all asset light. Every morning they get up, they have to sign 3 contracts. They have to make those contracts perform. So the question is, it's not my effort. They also have to make an effort to come to an investor and say, why not us? Why do people keep asking me this question all the time? Next time you have Puneet or Suma or Anurag on the panel, you should ask them, why doesn't Sammy own one of their hotels? None of them have approached us.
After we finish, we'll ask you, Anurag, okay?
Yeah, none of us have approached us.
Okay, so we're running out of time. So luxury versus mid-scale. Where is the smarter capital play in India? Let's say over the next 10 years. Add to that, what is the view on branded residences? And what's the view on leisure?
Branded residences is a fraud. And all my friends who are signing them are going to be co-conspirators. And some of the people you're signing with may go to jail. And you may be also need to have lawyers to protect you. Because what people are doing in India is signing a branded residences so that they can sell it on that name, hope to get the money to build anything. Okay. So I don't know why brands with amazing reputation are putting life worth of reputation on 5 new signings.
Any specific people doing that, Ashish?
Everybody is doing it. Taj, Marriott, who's not doing it, right?
Okay. Raj, you hearing that?
Yeah. I don't know. Why would you do that? I mean, there are branded residences at places. I get a call from a branded residence. Sir, I'm calling from XYZ. Would you want to buy X branded residence? I'm calling from X company, which is a global hotel company, by the way, right? And the nature by which that lady called me, I knew it's some broker sitting in Gurgaon. That's what is happening to branded residence. It's the biggest fraud. And I really pray that these guys get saved in future.
And last question, leisure?
Oh, I love leisure. I love leisure, but we would not invest in building a monstrosity at a place which is known for tranquility, right? So I grew up in mountains, by the way, okay? And so there's this joke about, there's this building called Montparnasse in Paris, you know? So Parisian architecture is all about low-rise, you know, very European. And then this one guy built this black high-rise in the middle of Paris. And Accor's headquarters used to be in Montparnasse. So when I was in Accor, I went to meet the CEO. He takes me at the higher floor at Montparnasse. And he says, look out, Ashish, do you know what the best thing about Montparnasse is? I said, what? He said, you don't see Montparnasse. And that's true for a lot of branded luxury resorts. So when you go to a resort in Mussoorie or Shimla, from there you see everything beautiful because you don't see that building. But be a resident in that city and you look at that building and bright lights at night and disco happening on the New Year, you do not want it. So that's not a segment we'll support or invest in, purely from an ESG and sustainability and conscious perspective. But I think we will do something in leisure which is very, very unique, much to our style.
Okay, well, there was so much more to talk about, and you guys can continue asking him questions over a drink in the evening as well. But thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, Dilip.
I hope the audience enjoyed that session as well.